Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're embarking on a really fascinating journey into the developing brain, specifically how it relates to Tourette syndrome. You sent us some truly insightful sources touching on concepts like brain pruning and rewiring.
Yeah, those are key concepts.
Exactly. And our mission today is to unpack these ideas, pull out the most important nuggets, and see what they reveal about this neurodevelopmental disorder.
It's definitely a challenging area of research, but I think also an incredibly hopeful one.
Hopeful. How so?
Well, we'll be looking at how the brain literally sculpts itself in early life and how those processes might go awry sometimes, but also, crucially, how the brain's incredible capacity for change, its plasticity, offers real possibilities for adaptation.
Right. That plasticity piece is huge. It's one of those topics where the science itself is just, well, mind-bogglingly cool, isn't it?
It really is. The complexity is astounding.
And the implications are even more profound. So what does this all mean for understanding Tourette syndrome? Let's dive in. So let's start with the basics then. What exactly is Tourette syndrome when we look at it through this lens of brain development?
Right. So what's fascinating here is that Tourette syndrome is categorized as a neurodevelopmental disorder.
Okay. Neurodevelopmental.
Yeah, which basically means it emerges as the brain is actively growing and changing, really organizing itself. This often shows up in early childhood.
And that timing is important.
Absolutely crucial, because this early childhood period is right when a process called synaptic pruning is at its most active, really hitting its peak.
Synaptic pruning, you mentioned that. It sounds like something you do in a garden. Can you help us understand what that means for our brains?
You're right. That's actually a great analogy. Thinking of it like gardening works really well.
Okay.
Synaptic pruning is essentially the brain's way of refining its neural connections. We're born with this massive overabundance of synapses.
Synapses being the connections between brain cells.
Exactly. Connections between neurons. Think of it like having way too many potential pathways, like a brand new city with roads going everywhere, even places nobody needs to go yet. Pruning is the natural process of removing the weaker, the unused, or the redundant connections.
Getting rid of the unnecessary roads.
Precisely. Which, in turn, strengthens the pathways that are used more frequently, the main highways, so to speak.
Making things more efficient.
Exactly. It makes the brain much more efficient. This whole process happens most dramatically during childhood and adolescence. It's a key part of brain maturation.
So, okay. If pruning is about making the brain more efficient, this sort of streamlining process, what does this mean for kids with Tourette syndrome? Are we seeing differences in how this natural gardening happens?
That's exactly what the research suggests, yes. Researchers have identified distinct differences in brain connectivity in kids with Tourette syndrome compared to their peers.
Differences in connectivity.
Yeah. And if we connect this to the bigger picture, these differences seem particularly noticeable in the circuits involved with things like motor control, inhibition-stopping actions, and executive function, like planning and decision-making.
Okay, so the core wiring might be a bit different.
It seems that way. The brain's sort of fundamental wiring blueprint might be subtly distinct, and that could influence how individuals with Tourette's process and, crucially, inhibit movements and thoughts.
And the sources mentioned specific areas.
They did. They highlight areas like the cortico-striatothalamo-cortical loops, CSTC loops for short.
Bit of a mouthful.
Yeah, it is. But these are really critical brain circuits. They're heavily involved in voluntary movement, habit formation, basically how our brains decide what actions to take and, importantly, when to stop them.
Right, the stopping part seems key for tics.
Exactly. Disruptions in these loops are strongly linked to the involuntary movements, or tics, we see in Tourette's.
Okay, what other areas?
Well, also implicated are regions like the prefrontal cortex, that's your decision-making, impulse control center. Then there's the basal ganglia, crucial for motor control, and the thalamus, which acts like a sort of central relay station for sensory and motor information.
So several key hubs involved.
Yeah.
And how do we know the connectivity is different?
Through advanced imaging techniques. Studies using things like MRI and diffusion tensor imaging DPI, which basically lets us map the brain's white matter tracks, these neural highways.
Oh.
Yeah, it's amazing stuff. These studies suggest altered connectivity patterns within those CSTC loops and related areas.
And this could be because of the pruning process.
That's a leading hypothesis. It could potentially be due to sort of abnormal pruning. Maybe those unneeded connections aren't cleared out as efficiently. Or perhaps it's even a delayed maturation, a slower development of these key brain regions.
That sounds potentially like a fixed difference, something that's just structurally distinct. But then our sources talk about rewiring. And this is where it gets really interesting and hopeful, as you said. Does this mean the brain can actually change and adapt, even if there are these early differences?
This raises such an important point, and the answer seems to be a resounding yes.
Okay.
Even though some neurological differences might be present early on, the brain remains incredibly plastic, especially in childhood and adolescence, but really throughout life.
Plastic meaning changeable, adaptable.
Exactly. It has this remarkable capacity to change, to adapt, to create new pathways and strengthen existing ones. It's definitely not a static organ. It's constantly evolving in response to experience.
So how does that relate to Tourette's? Can this plasticity be harnessed?
Yes, and our sources point to some powerful examples of this. Have you heard of CBIT? Comprehensive Behavioral Intervention for Tics.
I have, yes. It's a behavioral therapy.
That's right. And it's shown significant success in helping kids, and adults too, reduce tics. It works by actively retraining the brain's responses to the urges that precede tics.
So it's essentially creating new, more helpful neural pathways, like a conscious rewiring.
Precisely. It's behavior-based rewiring. And there are other methods too, things like mindfulness, biofeedback, sensorimotor retraining. They're all essentially leveraging this neuroplasticity to reshape connections.
That's fascinating.
And it's not just about formal therapy either. The sources also mention that things like environmental enrichment, providing stimulating and engaging experiences, and crucially, supportive parenting also play a huge role.
How so?
They help reinforce positive neural pathways, subtly guiding the brain's development and promoting adaptive changes. The environment really matters.
Right. So, okay, the brain can rewire. But going back to pruning for a second, what about direct studies on pruning and Tourette's in humans? Is this something scientists can actually, watch happening in real time?
That's the tricky part. Direct human studies specifically observing synaptic pruning at the microscopic level. They're incredibly rare, bordering on impossible in living brains currently.
Why is that? Too small, too complex?
Both. It happens at such a fine-grained level. So much of what we understand about the mechanics of pruning comes from animal models or from studying post-mortem human brain tissue.
Okay, so mostly indirect evidence in living humans.
Mostly indirect, yes, but it's still compelling evidence when you put it all together. The imaging, the behavioral studies, the developmental trajectories.
Can you give an example?
Sure. For instance, there was a review back in 2020, I think it was in Frontiers in Neurology, that discussed abnormal developmental trajectories in brains of individuals with Tourette's. It suggested that perhaps inefficient pruning, or maybe some kind of compensatory rewiring happening naturally, might underlie how symptoms change over time, why they often fluctuate.
That fits with what families often report, the waxing and waning of tics.
Exactly. And it's also supported by another really common observation. Genetic symptoms often decline significantly during adolescence for many individuals.
Right. You often hear they can improve or even disappear later on.
Yes. And this improvement could very well be due to natural synaptic reorganization as the brain continues to mature through adolescence. It's like the brain's own ongoing rewiring act, finding new, more efficient ways to operate as it finishes developing.
So bringing it all together then, what does this deep dive really reveal for us? Our exploration seems to confirm that you're absolutely right to connect synaptic pruning, brain rewiring, and the experience of Tourette symptoms.
Yeah, I think the takeaway is pretty clear. The developing brain in someone with Tourette syndrome is highly dynamic. It's not some fixed, unchanging state, but rather an ongoing process of change, adaptation, pruning, and rewiring.
And the hopeful part.
And the really hopeful news, the vital insight here, is that because of this dynamism, this plasticity, supportive environments, and therapeutic interventions like CBIT can genuinely help rewire neural circuits. They can promote adaptation and help manage symptoms effectively.
So the brain's capacity for change offers real possibilities.
Absolutely. The incredible plasticity of the young brain, and even the adult brain to a degree, offers real hope for navigating these challenges and improving quality of life.
It's just a powerful reminder, isn't it, of how resilient and adaptable our brains truly are.
It really is.
So for you, our listener, maybe something to ponder. If our brains are constantly pruning and rewiring themselves based on use and experience, what other areas of learning or personal growth might we actively prune? What old pathways could we let go of to strengthen new, more desirable ones in our own lives?
That's a great thought, applying the principle more broadly.
Yeah. Something to think about. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive.
My pleasure. Fascinating topic.